This show is a part of the podcast network of the Walled Garden Philosophical Society, an international community of philosophers and seekers dedicated to the pursuit of truth, wisdom, virtue, and the divine, wherever they may be found. To find out more, go to thewalledgarden.com. Hey everybody, welcome to my series on the writings of Seneca. Now, today I'm just going to be focusing on one sentence in the second letter or the second epistle from Seneca entitled On Discursiveness in Reading. Now, I'm actually also going to be taking this sentence kind of out of context because I'm not going to be talking about the actual entirety of the letter. As much as I'm going to be talking about the usefulness of this one sentence and how I think it can really make us think deeply about some changes that we might want to make in our lives. But to start this episode, I'm actually going to read you a quote from the French philosopher Blaise Pascal. Right now, he said, quote, "All of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone." End quote. Now, that is one of the all-time greatest philosophical statements, and you've probably heard it in one form or another throughout your life, and there's a reason why we really appreciate a quote like that. And I think that the reason is because we understand that there's some deep truth being spoken in those words. It is difficult for us to just sit in silence and be without any other external stimulus, without, busying ourselves with the next job to do or this or that, just to be able to sit and be with ourselves. And I think deep down we all know that there's something wrong about that uncomfortable feeling that we get just sitting with ourselves and being there. And, I think that this has to do as well with the upsurge in meditation techniques that we see in modern times. Like everybody is trying some form of meditation, and I think that that's because we all understand at this stage that we should be able to lose the distractions and just sit with ourselves, whether we're thinking or pondering or whether we're just sitting there trying to not think anything but just to be. And that's why I think that's such an important passage to think about. But, you might not recognize that about 1600 years before Pascal spoke those words, Seneca said the following line, and it's the line that we're focusing on in this entire episode today. And it goes like this, quote, "The primary indication to my thinking of a well-ordered mind is a man's ability to remain in one place and linger in his own company." End quote. Now this, as far as I can tell, is exactly the same idea. The idea that we should, if our mind is set properly, be able to be with ourselves, linger with ourselves, as Seneca said, spend time with ourselves happily. And I think that the interesting thing about this passage is to see that even 2,000 years ago, they were still dealing with the same kinds of issues that we deal with today. They were just different forms, right? So we still deal with this feeling of uneasiness, this feeling of constantly needing to do something, to be stimulated by something, constantly needing to distract ourselves from what's actually happening in our own minds or in the world around us. And that stops us from being able to do the extremely meaningful, necessary, important work of just sitting there with yourself. And if you want to test yourself and see just how uncomfortable you get being by yourself with yourself, I want to give you this challenge to do. And I'll set it up here because probably midway through 2020, I started actually noticing that I had a really bad habit. And that habit was, if I was at a restaurant with my wife and she got up to go get a drink or something like that, or, if I was on, if I was on a bus or a train, or if I was sitting in a park on a bench, or, if I was just out in public and I was all by myself, I had a habit of picking up my phone and starting to look at what was on my phone, whether it was on social media or maybe even putting some headphones in and listening to something, or, anything other than just sitting there and looking around and thinking. Anything other than just being with myself. Has this ever happened to you? Do you ever do that? Do you find yourself alone and then immediately start to look around for what can stimulate you and your senses? I'm sure that it's happened to you because it seems to be something that I see all the time. And it's actually really strange to see somebody sitting by themselves, not on their phone, but just sitting there looking around or thinking. It's becoming very uncommon to see something like that. And I think that this really speaks to just the absolute deluge of distractions that we have at our disposal at any one time in the click of a finger in our life right now. And when I started noticing that I was so quick to try and look for some distraction, it really became a question of, well, why wouldn't you do something to try and make this not the case? And so I started practicing. I started challenging myself. If Jen got up to go get a drink at the bar and I was there sitting by myself, I would force myself to not get my phone out of my pocket, but just to sit there and look around, just look at the beach or, look around in the restaurant, just think and be there. And I can tell you 100% that I know I have made progress in this area. I know that I am seeing progress now where it's not actually that uncomfortable for me to not pick up the phone. And I think that this speaks to the entrainment of the human mind, right? Like we actually train ourselves willingly to be happy with just finding a distraction whenever we desire. And we need to get back to that habit of practicing the art of just sitting there with yourself and being there and thinking and looking at the world around you. The things that are happening around you are so much more important than what's happening on your phone. And I am convinced of that. So, that's kind of one of the reasons why I think that this is such an important and necessary quote for our times, that the well-ordered mind is the mind that can sit and be with itself. And, we live in a time where the smartest people in the world are being employed to help a company figure out how to get you to spend an extra 5 seconds on an app. Like that's the kind of world we live in. And so we do need to double our efforts. We need to double our efforts to detach ourselves from these distractions. Remove certain apps from your phone. Remove certain distractions from your life so that you can find more time for actually seeing what's going on around you and, most importantly, what's going on inside of you. I have absolutely found in the past year and a half of my life that the most meaningful and important moments in my life often came from times where I was just sitting there thinking, trying to work through a problem in my life, trying to work through a new theory or concept that I was trying to grasp fully, trying to think about something that was important and meaningful to me. But if all you're ever doing is filling your mind with new content, new music, new stimulus, new Facebook feeds, new Instagram photos, if all that you're ever doing is filling your mind with more stuff, then how do you ever expect to let anything actually seep in? So yeah, I am convinced that this quote from Seneca is absolutely true and more necessary than ever to fully understand and embody in our lives. So I'd really like to encourage you to try that challenge that I gave you. Notice yourself the next time you're in a situation where you're faced with a choice to either sit there and just be with yourself or to pick up the closest thing that can distract you from the pain of vulnerability, from the pain of having to actually look around you or look within yourself. You might be pleasantly surprised I wouldn't be surprised if most of you listening to this feel just like I have felt in the past, that real need to pick something up and distract ourselves. But I'd also like to encourage you to find some moments just to think and just to work through things in your own mind. Get creative, get imaginative, It's your mind. You can think about absolutely anything. That's one of the great things that you start to learn when you start peeling back the distractions and go deep within your own mind. You learn that it's an amazing world in there, and you can think about and imagine anything that you want. And it can be so much fun. So I hope that you take a few things away from this episode and build some practices in your life, build some strategies so that you can move towards a life where you are more comfortable in your own skin and in your own mind. But other than that, I really hope you've enjoyed this episode and many more to come. Talk to you next time.